I would now like to recognize Congressman Mfume.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, my real thanks to you and the ranking member for having discussions that led us to this point. This, for lack of a better term, has scared the hell out of me. And I thought I knew something about AI. I'm bopping around on the campus talking to students and in a classroom now and then teaching them, but what I've heard today is unlike anything I have ever heard, particularly in terms of our national security. I think the chairwoman mentioned or quoted Einstein a few minutes ago. He also said that great minds have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre spirits. And I don't know if you're encountering violent opposition, but I think you're encountering a great deal of inattentive or unattentive population groups who, just for whatever reason, are not paying attention to what's going on. It is very scary, and I would strongly support, Madam Chair, any future hearings on this. I just don't think that we have much of a choice. It's that imperative. And Dr. Schmidt, you said it was a national imperative, almost a national emergency. That got my attention, and it will keep my attention. I don't know that we can do enough to ring the bell on this so that our institutions, whether it's government or business or academia, all start paying the kind of attention that we really, really need. Dr. Madry, you in your testimony talked about the overarching points, and the fourth one you talked about was that we pay attention, critical attention, to the artificial intelligence supply chain, that it will structure the distribution of power in a new AI world. Could you take just a moment to explain that?
Of course. So essentially, the way AI is being deployed right now is no longer that there's just one entity who gathers the data, trains the model, and applies it and deploys it to a given task. The way things happen is that there is a supply chain, in particular with these new generative models. Like, they are very expensive to train, but they are very capable. And essentially what happens is that, one of these companies, and there is very few companies that can afford training such a model, they essentially develop it and then let other companies build on top of it. So think of this as just like having initial capability and just adjusting it. For instance, you have a model like ChatGPT, it is able to summarize text and understand to some extent the text. So maybe you have a hiring tool that then you build on top of it that essentially uses this capability to screen the resumes and something. There's many risks there, but this is just an example. So we are having this kind of supply chain of interdependencies. And again, we have upstream, where there's very few players, there's a very few critically important models on which a lot of economy depends, and then there are all these interactions between these other things. So this is something that now you have to think, there's the ecosystem.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. This sort of boasting that China has been doing that by 2030, they will be the dominant player, is scary also. And the fact that the universities in Beijing and elsewhere are openly sort of trying to develop this and develop thinking that way, and that it's only 7 years from now makes me, again, very concerned. I'm going to talk about risk for just a moment, and then my time will have expired. This whole notion of a war and decisions being made with the use of AI in a millisecond that counter and then counter the decision. I don't know to what extent the military establishment, I assume they're looking at this as much as you are, but it is interesting. Now, I'd like to ask also, there are, as you know, fallible algorithms. You know better than I. They're just misleading or they're incorrect. What happens in consumerism, in business and law enforcement, in military contexts that frighten you the most as risk as a result of an infallible algorithm? Any of you?
Quickly, the biggest issue, as I mentioned, is the compression of time. Mm-hmm. Let's assume you have time. Then the question is, who gets to decide between the system and the human? And I'm very concerned about a misalignment of interests where the human has one set of incentives, the computer has been trained against a different set of outcomes, and the whole society wants an even different goal. And if I spend lots of time with the military, who I'm really, really proud of and fond of, and they all want systems that help them automate their decisions. In practice, their use of technology will be largely to replace boring and uninteresting jobs like watching TVs and things like that. These are things like Project Maven and its successors and so forth. So I think at the moment, the government at the military level is going to use these more for sensing and analysis and not decision-making. Just to make it very clear, I think we would all agree it's not ready to make a final life-critical decision. It may never be, but it's certainly not now.
Yeah, thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.